I don't have the booklet with me, but today is the word for you today. It's Friday. We are going over John chapter 5. It is a very rich chapter. I'm only going to do a very small portion of it. We are going to read verse 19. If you will read it with me, it's John chapter 5, verse 19. Jesus replied, "Truly I tell you, the Son is not able to do anything on his own, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, the Son likewise does these things." Now, as a reminder of where we are, this is right after Jesus' third public sign in the book of John. It's where he heals the sick, heals the person who is he was disabled for 38 years. It's a huge sign. But he does this on the Sabbath, and he tells the man to pick up his mat, which, of course, the Pharisees wouldn't have liked because it's work on the Sabbath. And so right after this happens, the rabbis, the Pharisees, the people around, they begin to persecute Jesus because he was doing these miracles on the Sabbath, and Jesus is responding to them. In verse 17, he says, "My Father is still working, and so I am still working." And the Jews, they began to get angry. They were ready to kill him. They started plotting to kill him because he was very clearly saying, "I am equal to God." And then he says this verse 19. And it's an incredible thing because he's saying a couple of very important truths about who he is and what he represents. Firstly, one thing he's saying is he is completely equal to God. He says this because he's saying, I can do nothing apart from him. He's saying he and I are one. The same work. Whatever I see him doing, I am also doing because I cannot be separated from my Father. We do the very same things. And so he's saying, I'm completely equal, one, united with God the Father. Secondly, he says he is the perfect example of dependence and relationship with the Father. It's exactly what any child of God, any son of God should do, is be wholly and completely dependent upon them and their relationship with their parent. He says this, he says, I'm not able to do anything on my own, but only what he sees the Father doing. And the third thing he says, and what I see here, is that he is the example of living completely and obediently within the will of God. Jesus was the example of a perfectly obedient person to the Father's will. Whatever the Father does, the Son likewise does these things. And in verse 20 it says, because the Father loves the Son and shows him everything that he is doing. And he will show him greater works than these so that you will be amazed. See, Jesus is not just saying, I am God, I'm equal with God, I'm one with the Father, which is claiming divinity, claiming to be God, saying, I am one with him. He's also showing us what dependence looks like. I can't do anything apart from him at all. He says the same thing to his disciples in John chapter 15, where he says, I am the vine, you are the branches. Apart from me, you can do nothing. He's teaching them. You need to be completely and utterly dependent upon your relationship with me. You need to have the same relationship that I have as a son to the Father. And also, Jesus spent every waking moment, every moment of his life in perfect obedience to God the Father. The example of what we are supposed to be as well. See, Jesus was the perfect Son of God. And because of him, only through him, we're able to have a relationship with God. We're able to become adopted sons of God. But what he also represents is the example of being a son of God. Now, my My grandfather, my dad, and we all like the same kinds of movies. So every now and then, especially when I was a teenager and I had more time, we would sit and we'd watch a movie together, watch superhero movies, action movies, stuff like that. And I noticed one time because we were all sitting on the couch and we all had our hands like this. We all had our chins like this, and we all had our legs sticking up we were all in the same exact sitting position on the couch. And I realized that's because my grandfather started doing it. My dad saw him doing it and started picking it up. And then I saw them both doing it and I started picking it up. We all watch movies and we sit the same exact way. It comes as a response of being a son who's looking at the Father and then imitating them. In the same way, Jesus says, he says, I only what he sees the Father doing, for what the Father does, the Son does these things also. Likewise, does these same things. We're supposed to be imitators of God. And Jesus was the perfect and ultimate example of what that looks like, seeing what the Father does and doing it because he is one with him. And although it's currently unattainable for us, being perfectly one with God like Jesus is, it's the example we're supposed to strive for. The relationship, the dependence on God. We can have that because of Christ. And we should strive with all that we are and all that we do to live within the will of our Father, just like Jesus did. So, when you go out in the world today, when you're just going through everyday life and all that God has called you to do, strive to follow Christ's example. Depend on God in all things. Live obediently to his will. And chase a relationship like the one we are able to have because of Jesus. Have a great day.